Hi everyone, it's Booney. I'm going to practice again. I might redo this later, but I think it's nice to practice, get better every time you do it. I made this thing for Instagram and it's about triangulation. So I'm going to show it and then I'm going to expand on it, hopefully a little bit more to help people understand. Okay. So this is a pretty common thing that I think you might see when you start exploring relationship dynamics, family systems type of psychology, anything with patterns and relationships. I think this will somehow come about, and it could be described in different ways, but I think the overall thing is that it comes out looking like a triangle. So let's do an example of where two people are having conflict. And going back to my other BOWEN family systems video, it's about anxiety and energy in a system. We affect each other through this set of traits that we have. It's intense, it's uncomfortable, it needs to be diffused. And what happens is sometimes people have relationship patterns where they withdraw or cut off, or they fuse with the person trying to fix the conflict or fix the other person, so they ignore the stuff with them. So this is similar type of dynamic based, again, the origin of all of this is based on how we respond or react to the energy of other people or conflict. Okay, so it could be two people relationship, it could be a family system, it could be society. So let's take a very small example of two people in a relationship and they're in an argument and they're not talking about it. They have conflict, there's tension. They, instead of dealing with this intensity between two people, they pull in either a third person, which is pretty common. Sometimes it can be healthy when you need to vent, to talk to them about, like, this person said this person did this, like, I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, I don't know what to do, like, I'm really angry and upset, or I feel sad. All these things can be helpful to get it out and think out loud. And many times when people are in conflict, we say things that we cannot take back. And so I think it's a good idea to bounce your ideas and emotions off of a neutral, compassionate third party with the intention of coming back for closure when possible. So sometimes triangles can stay, sometimes they go away over time, but like that's one example of a triangle. Okay. A next example of triangles is when you have conflict, and instead of going towards the person for closure, maybe you have your reasons why you can't go. It could be unsafe, it could just be pointless. That person could be very reactive and harmful to you. So instead you could be gossiping. Gossip is a very common thing that feminine women, girls do in middle school to high school. It's a form of power. It's a form of social exclusion. It's a really powerful way to show that there's hierarchies in a system and push people towards different areas of like power and value, perceived value, which I don't really like. But gossip does happen. I am guilty of doing that when I was younger, and I'm so glad that I don't do that anymore, or try not to. I don't think I do, but maybe TV shows, I don't know. So another form of triangulation is, again, conflict between two people, two things. This is a pretty common one. That's why I want to talk about it. It's like you have a relationship, a couple, let's say a hetero couple. A common thing is that there's a gamer, and instead of the two people really understanding what's underneath the arguing, like a need is not being met, maybe some early trauma or early relational stuff is being triggered because of their dynamic, someone can't handle it, so they go towards a behavioral addiction, usually like gaming, overworking. That's a big one, and so this gets more complicated, right? Because you start seeing about what's the societal emphasis or perception of the behavioral addiction that someone's doing. Is it perceived as, oh wow, they're so self-sacrificing and giving because they're working so much? It could also be, you have to think about the intention. It could be a way of avoiding to actually spend time with your partner because you just can't handle them when they're having a hard time. These things are real, these things happen, and at the same time, I don't blame people for figuring out how to cope in these systems that they're in. It's just something to start being aware of. If you don't like the patterns that have existed, again, backing up a little bit just to identify the pattern is powerful. It's so huge. Next step is to figure out what's the option. What do we do next, right? So I'm going to go through more examples of the triangle. So again, conflict between two people. The energy is too intense. And so instead of going between the two people, they want to diffuse the energy and redirect it towards something else. It's an unrelated thing. Something that I've seen before is like people criticize how they parent a child or how they take care of a pet. That's a really big one because, again, children and pets, again, I'm going to call it the word trigger, but it does impact us to this in the psyche. It makes us think about our early childhood memories, the way we were mistreated, the way we didn't get our needs met. And so like that stuff comes out and gets projected onto our partner, loved ones, people that we live with. It gets very intense and messy. And so like we're just like throwing things in our pain out at people all over the place. And then we're judging things on the surface. So usually triangulation involves something that doesn't have anything to do with the original conflict or the original people involved. So once you start identifying the patterns that are occurring, it's important to also back up and say, what are we avoiding here? What's the original conflict or the original need that's not being met? And like the original two people or groups, do I even feel like I'm safe enough to address my needs? And sometimes there's this component of codependency that happens within conflict triangles where a person never knew how to get their needs met. So they don't even know. So they're constantly giving and giving. So like, here's another type of common pattern with triangulation is someone is a caregiver type of personality, but they're in their shadow and they're over giving. They're giving way too much. And then after a certain time of giving, they feel resentful. They feel so angry and used in a relationship that they're always meeting the needs of other people. But at the same time, this person allowed themselves to give so much. And the other person in the relationship was like, well, this is how we started. And there was no questioning or a challenge to this. So I didn't know. Right. And so like, there's a lot, again, it gets messy, it gets complicated, and can get pretty deep. And so I do recommend therapy for this kind of stuff when it's about your early unmet needs or unconscious stuff that you're not sure where this is even coming from. Like if you're having triangulation from conflict and you're avoiding working through problems with people that you care about, that is something I think really very much can be in the realm of therapy. So therapists are totally prepared to handle something like this. So, I will link some directories in the video description too. So the next part about triangulation is that triangulation may happen when conflict is intense between two or more parties. The third entity is brought in to stabilize the tension of the system. So it's another person, gossip, behavior, unrelated stuff. And this is fine when people need to vent to think of things through. So like we all need sounding boards to process. Again, none of this stuff is good or bad. It's just important to acknowledge the patterns that we're doing so we have more perspective. We're bringing all the unconscious stuff to the conscious part of our lives. And that is power and control for you to do what you need to do to grow. It's like, is this working or not? I didn't know that it wasn't working because that's all I knew, right? And so there's a lot of stuff going on here. So, however, many people avoid directly talking about or addressing the main conflict so it grows in intensity and how it affects others. I want to have a caveat here in terms of culture. So in the Western psychology's perspective, there's this term of enmeshment, right? And in the collectivist culture, there's a lot of indirect dealing with conflict. I want to honor that there are many ways to deal with conflict, and it's not always like direct eye contact, looking you in the face and talking about, what happened and then having direct closure. Some of these things can happen, but in terms of some cultures, I think there's always this one step removed, maybe two step removed forms of apology. I know that in Asian cultures, I don't know how many of you have ever had your parents apologize to you. For me, it's 0. But have you ever had your parent cut fruit for you? Have you ever seen them give you the best piece of something at the dinner table and you see them eating like the scraps or something, but they're saying that it's the best part. You know, my dad does that with mango. He will give me the meatiest, juiciest part of the mango and he'll eat the seeds. You know, like I know he enjoys it, but also at the same time, I know he's sacrificing and showing that he cares in his own way. And so like there is a very big cultural component that sometimes gets ignored. And so that again, it can perpetuate harm when the cultural component is not at least explored, to make sure that this is acknowledging the system that exists in the moment, not some system that you think is supposed to be existing. Okay, so identifying triangulation problems is super important. I totally think that. And coming together when calm to identify steps towards problem solving helps move from a perspective of me versus you towards us versus the problem. And this is a really big tenet of couples therapy, couples coaching, period. So it's a weird, like when you talk to couples arguing and they're both in an unhealthy state, you know, it's not toxic. You know, some people just never got shown these coping strategies or learning how to communicate, how to solve problems without yelling or fighting. Like I understand that, you know, like not everyone's family system is healthy in that way. We all have our own individual ghosts to deal with, our own traumas that we inherit. And one of the things that could be your responsibility to deal with in your generation and parts of your lifetime is how to deal with conflict and separating yourself from having to be right. And so like when I hear people talking about arguing with their partner and they're trying to prove that their partner hurt them, they're trying to prove that their partner was wrong in some way, it's so close to fixing the problem, but not, because it creates this me versus you dynamic, right? So the conflict is still there, but you're rewording it. So like instead of, you know, you argued about the dishes or something, right? That's a big one. Or someone's not helping around the house. The underlying theme could be someone feels used. They don't feel appreciated, right? They feel like their things that they do aren't acknowledged. And so like some people, mostly like hetero women in the relationship, they will do things without acknowledgement because it's just like you accept it. It's part of your duty at home, you're a caregiver, and you want things to be running smoothly at home. And so like sometimes the hetero male partner can come in and not see all the things that are being done, all the invisible labor. And then when they do something, they feel like, this is, again, it's not all the time, but just like a certain type of dynamic where they feel like they do one thing and they want the praise, right? But then the female partner is like falling apart saying, why do you need praise? Because I do this stuff all the time. You should just do it, right? And so it becomes this like conflict when war of back and forth of not feeling appreciated, not feeling acknowledged for the things that you're doing, losing a little bit of like respect or intimacy between your partner. Again, all these things can come out between a simple dynamic of your partner didn't do something you asked them to do, like put the laundry away or go pick up something for dinner, and all this stuff underneath, the unconscious stuff, right? The childhood stuff, the really important stuff that we have to be working on for our entire lives comes out in intimacy and really important relationships in our lives. And so like, boom, the triangulation starts to happen. We start ignoring it because like, what is the point? We continue arguing. What's the point? All this stuff, like it's gonna repeat again and again. I say the same thing, they say the same thing. We're a gridlock, you know? And so this is where relationship coaches and therapists can really help, because this third neutral party can come in and help diffuse what's going on. So important. Okay, so these are some important things to remember, that triangulation is so common. It's not a bad thing. It just depends on intention, right? So it's common with people of different attachment styles, personality types, upbringings, cultural backgrounds, and neurotypes. We are different. It makes sense that there may be clashes and misunderstandings that need another person pulled in to help you feel heard. We're just different. Well, of course, it makes sense that your perspective and worldview and the needs that you say or assume aren't always automatically understood. Our brains and bodies are different. Our life histories are different. Everything could be potentially very different. And remember that the conflict is between the original people involved, and to develop a healthy relationship, conflict helps identify areas of pain, things to explore, important values that need to be honored. So like, I know some couples sometimes like, oh, we're doing great, we never argue. So like for me, it's a potential yellow flag, because this is my reasoning. If you're not at least bringing up wants and needs that clash sometimes, someone is suppressing their individual needs. Like in the rare chance that someone and another person meet and their needs are met and understood and perspective is honored all the time, 100%, that's a dream come true. That's amazing. Like that's a wonderful joy to share your life with, that someone is open to being fluid with you and learning how to read each other's cues without going into areas of conflict. But reality wise, couples, relationships, friendships, people argue. People have conflict because their stuff comes out and things get misinterpreted. Words get said that weren't meant, or words that were meant, but like they were said in moments of pain or, you know, annoyance. These things matter. And it also helps identify, again, areas that are so important to the heart of someone. And sometimes when we're in a good mood, we're not going to talk about these values or the things that bother us, right? Because we're in a good mood. So like the stuff that happens, the important stuff that is vulnerable and that needs nurture, comes from the conflict. So these are like opportunities for growth. And conflict's not bad, right? What matters is how people work towards respectful and open problem solving together. So like, I know some people, this is a side tangent, some people crave the conflict because they misconstrue conflict for passion. I want to throw that in too, because it's not. A lot of people who grew up in trauma or neglect, you know, fending for yourself growing up, you may be chasing or going towards relationships where it's high intensity conflict, and then that gives you that feeling that you're connected, right? Because the opposite of that is neglect and trauma. So again, it makes sense that you think that that's the opposite, but reality wise, it's unhealthy, and that is not love. But that does take time to acknowledge. And I don't want to be pushing anyone's buttons if they're in relationships like that, because everyone has a place that they're coming from, perspectives and reasons for why they're in a relationship that's sometimes demeaning or sometimes snarky, and you feel like something's off, but at least they kind of love you. So like that for me, again, I will link resources related to domestic violence, the abuse cycle, and codependency, because for me, it's a really big deal that those of us who never knew what healthy love looks like, we're repeating that. And we actually think that conflict, again, is equated to passion when it's not. It is not the same thing. Screaming and fighting for someone to acknowledge your pain and humanity is not love. That's not. And another thing to remember is some problems will be perpetual, which means they cannot be solved. Okay. So that is crucial, and understand the reality of relationships too. There's some things you just can't fight over, because again, some things you got to let go, and you got to weigh it. Is this something that is worth fighting for in a relationship again and again? Or is it something like I'm willing to overlook because my love for this partnership is stronger? Something to think about and acknowledge together. And the final thing is like, do you want to be right, or do you want to have a stronger relationship? Which is the thing that couples can grow towards, friendships, over time, shifting that perspective of what is the point of arguing or saying something? Is it to prove a point? Sure, sometimes you do, to prove something, to grow, but like the way you deliver it does matter. The kindness, compassion, the patience, all this stuff matters. So some things to try is identifying intentions for what you do. We may have very different perspectives on what something means. Be honest and open about naming our motivations for our things. And that's, again, being honest and learning about your motivations sometimes might be new. Sometimes we're on default, like autopilot. We have no idea why we do the things we do. We never think about that stuff. Some people, more than others, think about why they do the things they do all the time. And so it's something to pause and maybe ask your partner, ask your friends, why do you think I do this? If you don't know, right? And again, all this stuff to think about and do is like therapists and coaches can help too. If there's layers of trauma and stuff like that, I do recommend leaning towards therapy. Practice apologizing for small things. This helps create a history of repair and bonding, working towards togetherness. Everything involves practice. Everything. So like the small things do add up, because like if you think about having big blow-ups and conflict, like really explosive arguments, you don't want to practice with those big things, right? You can't go there because you're going to be dysregulated. You're going to be resentful and angry and like feel hurt or vulnerable or misunderstood. All this stuff can be very heavy. And so like, again, practice lifting small weights. The small things do matter. So like the little things of like, oh, I forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. I'm sorry about that. Like little things like that. Like one of the hardest things to say, I think, for some people is to say sorry. It's amazing once you start practicing that. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you're not perfect, but we think we have to be. Like, we're completely destroyed if we do something wrong. But that's, again, perfectionism and needing to work through some personal things. I think, again, therapy can help with that. And empowerment types of coaching. So learn, practice, and share how your best calm or ground yourself. Some of us need more time and space to reset, but it can be interpreted as leaving the conversation. Come back when it's a good time for both. So if you're going to leave a high conflict situation, please tell the person. Like sometimes people perceive that as like, you just left, you abandoned me, you abandoned us in the relationship. People need to understand your intentions of things. Like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm emotionally hijacked, I am so angry now, so I'm so hurt, I need space to leave, to reset. Like if I stay in this conversation right now, I'm going to say or do things that we can't take back. It might, damage the relationship. I don't want to say anything that's going to hurt you because I'm frustrated right now. Please, I need space. These things do matter. But like practicing about being calm and like, how do you calm down? Sometimes people, to focus, like neurodivergent people, they'll look at their phone while someone's talking because it's so intense, right? So they need to focus on something. So like, here's the neurotypical, like forcing someone to give you eye contact, to look at you when they're talking. That's something, again, could be misperceived as being rude. I don't think it's being rude, but again, you have to be honest with your intention. Are you not looking at someone in the eyes because it's very uncomfortable as a neurodivergent person who's sensitive, overwhelmed by stimulation? Or is it because like you feel uncomfortable for your own reasons? Is it because like looking at a phone helps you focus because you are overwhelmed? You feel like you're about to shut down if you're dealing with so much intensity at the same time. All these reasons matter, but sometimes we don't even know that these things are unique experiences. And so to identify them, name them, and share them is so important. So write down or make a visible list of the things you don't want to talk about yet or ever. Again, therapists can help. It's like, what are the things that you're uncomfortable with? What's the maybe area that you can talk for like 10, 15 minutes? What's the thing, like if you talk for more than 10 minutes of that, you're going to explode and you're done. These things are important too, because we're in relationships where we're assuming things. Assumptions destroy relationships. So it's important to, again, write them down. And again, these things can change over time. It's like, well, I said that I never wanted to talk about this in the beginning of our relationship, but actually, since we've been growing and learned how to work through conflict, I'm more open to talking about this for a little bit more now. Things can change. And practice expressing needs and wants for small things too. So when the big stuff comes around, there are patterns for what someone considers important. Like you can kind of pick it up. It's like, oh, my partner keeps on saying that this is important. This is important. Literally say the words, this is important. And I know some people are going to say like, well, if my partner loves me, they will already know. I shouldn't have to tell them. If you think that way, ask your partner what they think about it. Again, that could be something that's sabotaging the trust and ability to grow as a relationship. If something matters to you, what does it mean to you having to remind your partner? Because the outside part of it is like, do you trust that your partner is going to deliver? Do you trust that your partner is going to remember? Do you feel like you're forcing your partner to do stuff for you? All these things can be dissected and explored in therapy or coaching. And name clear boundaries when other people try to get involved or when you share with others. The conversation always comes back to the original people to work through. Yeah, if you get other people in your drama, remember what you told them, because sometimes when you vent, they look at your partner in a different light. It's like, oh, I don't like your partner anymore because you just said all this bad stuff. But then when you have closure, you got to remind them like, oh yeah, we worked it through. You got to tell your friends and your loved ones about the good stuff too, or else they're going to have a bias of what's only when there's conflict. Okay, last thing is about intentional triangulation. Therapists and other professional helpers can intentionally triangulate themselves into intense relationships to help diffuse heightened stress or energy in the system. So yeah, that's what therapists do. That's what helpers do. Like, we come into the system between two people, if it's relationship stuff, and diffuse the energy to kind of like be more logical, rational, help you cope, help you calmly identify what's the real problem here, what's the pattern, what's going on, what would you like to do next. The tricky but skillful job is to know when to be part of the triangle and when to step back to allow people to work through conflict and grow as a relationship. Well-meaning people could intentionally triangle themselves into your drama. People care and they want to help, but it sometimes distracts them from the original conflict and makes things bigger than they have to be. So think about that too. Like, you have a lot of people with different archetypes, right? There's some people who have a strong fixer type of codependent relationship with other people. So instead of dealing with their personal stuff, they latch onto the drama and the trouble of other people. Look out for that, because that's not well-meaning. It's actually opportunistic. Clear, direct communication with how you want or don't want people involved is important. People will continue to help unless their methods are challenged. And that's part of your personal empowerment, to speak up and say, I appreciate you wanting to help here, but like, I think we got it. We've worked through some stuff and we're going to get professional help, or we learned how to work through our own stuff. So like, I'll come to you when I need to talk about this, or this, but right now I don't need your help. Thank you. To establish new boundaries when people behaved a certain way for a long time can be hard. So again, professional support can help with this, because whenever I describe to my clients why you need help with professionals sometimes or not, it's that safety and environment to practice as a numbers game. It's numbers. You need a history of success to feel like it actually is part of your life now. If you're trying to practice and embody a new way of existing, like you working through conflict, seeing yourself a certain way, adopting new archetypes into your, into your landscape, like all these things matter, because you're facing a lifetime of not being this way. So you need safety and affirmation that this is really you too. When you go back into your family systems or the relationships that have seen you a certain way, they will try and sabotage or put you back into homeostasis. Homeostasis was an old way of being because they're comfortable with the old you. So that's important to have this. Again, your professional helper is your safety. If you trust them and they've built this relationship with you to trust and practice being something that you've wanted to be and know that you can be, it gives you the most sense of like power, affirmation, recognition that this is you too, and you can go out into the world without being judged or being, shaped in the way of other people trying to push you back and put you in a different box. Like, no, that's not me anymore. That was a box that served me for a while because I needed to survive. It was a box I needed because people told me and I believe them and I trust them, but maybe I grew. Different things happen in life and I realized I don't want to be that way anymore. There's some things I want to keep, but this intentional growing and transformation can happen more. I think intentional change happens more quickly in the safety of professional help. So that's just my caveat. When you don't have the community and support to grow, and that's a lot of us, we don't have that safety, whether people believe in that change or not. It's just all the stuff that comes out when we're with people who are part of our past. So as therapists and helpers who don't know anything about your past, it means a lot. And that can kind of catapult you into the future, to new versions and possibilities of who you are. So that was actually a longer video than I expected to talk about triangulation. I hope that is very useful for people who wanted to learn more about these patterns, because I see triangulation, family dynamic systems everywhere. And so like when you start seeing this way, you'll start to see how people are pulling or pushing towards your drama or your celebrations. Like all this stuff matters with energy, and like who's being drawn to you when you're having a hard time, who's going to celebrate you when you're doing well in life. Sometimes people only want to come towards you when you're sad, or they ignore you when you're sad, and all this stuff is part of triangulation. How can we find the way to balance it and get your needs met and honor the relationships that you want to keep? So all this stuff, again, I'm going to keep on saying it, can be done and explored in therapy. So I appreciate everyone watching. If you find it useful, please give this video a like and share it with your friends or people who you think might be interested in this type of information. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care.